Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to a mining rig thing. I'm going to assume for this video that you have not dealt anything at all with a GPU mining rig and you kind of want to get your feet wet. And that's exactly what this rig is for and who it's for. So I'm going to go over the basics. You will need a frame of some sort. I will link this one down below. If you're using lower power graphics cards, you can get away with just a single stacker frame. This one is good for up to 12 graphics cards. I'm only going to use it with 6, but I'm using GeForce RTX 3070 Ti's, which are pretty power hungry. So for the sake of this build, I'm going to be going over what I'm going to do, which is assuming I'm going to be running 6. I can't use all my hands here. RTX 3070 Ti's. So the component choice, you have to be able to power everything correctly. You have to be able to interface all 6 graphics cards with your main board, your motherboard. And you have to have ideally enough memory if you're going to be using something like NiceHash or 2Miners in Windows. I'm going to be setting this up in Hive OS. What that is, it's an extremely lightweight, I'm not going to say it's open source, but it's a Linux-based operating system that this component down here will run on, and actually it will boot on a solid state drive. This is just a cheapo 120 gigabyte drive. I will link that down below as well. And we will need Ethernet, so you'll have to make an Ethernet cable. There is a way where you can use Wi-Fi right off the boot, but I would always recommend, even if you end up using Wi-Fi, that you start with a hardwired internet connection to set it up. So anyway, first things first, get yourself a frame, assemble it, make sure it has enough slots, and make sure the slots are far enough apart for your graphics cards. This one does give us some room to grow. We could easily add some more cards in the future, but our board, as you can see, only has 6 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a concern you're definitely going to want to pay attention to when you're buying a board, and not all boards with 6 slots are actually able to handle 6 graphics cards. So this is an ASRock B450 Pro 4, not B450M Pro 4. I have used this one quite a bit. It's still brand new and available. It has out-of-the-box support for 1st and 2nd gen Ryzen. The V2 has support for 3rd gen Ryzen, so like the 3600, the 3900 XT, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have out-of-the-box support for the 5600, the 5600G, stuff like that, but you can flash it. So I would suggest you get yourself a Ryzen 5 3600 or a 3300X for this build, just because you know it will work with the V2 variant of this board, which I will link down below as well. I would recommend getting 16 gigabytes of RAM. This is a cheap silicon power kit, 3200 speed, way overkill for what we need, but this component will actually, all of this stuff is easily resellable after you're done mining, whereas a mining specific motherboard, very expensive and harder to resell. So there are some settings we have to go through on this, which I will get to with you, but right now, make sure you get your frame assembled. There are little items called standoffs. You will get a bunch of these in the bag with the frame. Make sure that you match up the holes. There's one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. That's very, very critical. You don't want to put too many in because they'll short circuit on the board, and you don't want to put too few in because you might bend it or cause some other issues. Those just screw in. You can use a pliers, you can use a little hex driver. I believe they're 5mm. And then you use the Phillips screws just to set this in place. So once this is fastened, the next step is going to be installing your power supplies. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can get retired server power supplies from, like a really noisy rack-mounted computer server that's in a server room. Those are really powerful, they're really cheap, and they're really efficient, but they're kind of noisy. And you have to have a kind of dodgy-looking aftermarket board, usually from China, that adapts the little gold edge connector to actual PCI Express connectors for graphics cards. So what I would recommend is just get yourself a couple of these. If you're going to run 6 3070 Ti's, get 3, so 2 per card. If you're running 3060 Ti's or Radeon RX 6600s, I think 2 will probably suffice. But I would always err on the side of using too many power supplies. This can get really, really sketchy, and it can turn into a fire risk if you have too many graphics cards on a power supply. So these are great. I've been using them a long time. They are gold rated, which means even on a 110 volt outlet at half load, these things are about 90% efficient. Taking 1,000 watts there, they're going to bring in 900 watts here. Obviously, it's not that much because it's a 600 watt power supply, but these are great. And the frame here has spots for 2 of them. So if you were doing 63060 Ti's, you're set. I'm going to have to find a spot for the 3rd power supply. But anyway, I'm going to unbox these. I'm going to get them mounted in the frame. And then I will start setting up one graphics card in here. And I will show you how to, get set up with Hive, make the media, and get this thing booted so we can get some settings flashed onto it. So that is what 2 power supplies should look like. You're going to have to dictate which one is your primary and which one's your secondary. It doesn't matter, but whichever power supply you plug in your motherboard to, which is this 24-pin connector and this 8-pin connector, you do not have to do anything with the power on, power off situation. So the motherboard handles that signal when you tell a computer to turn on. However, your secondary and tertiary power supply, you do have to control it with the switch on the back. There are splitter cables you can buy. They do work really, really well, but there's also a free way you can do it. So to just have this powered on every single time that switch is on, what you do is you bridge terminal 4 and 5. So count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. With the clip on the top, you stick something in there, and ideally electrical tape over it. It is just a ground reference signal, but you're going to want to bridge it with something. So I almost always just cut apart the twist tie that's used to bundle these cables and bridge it. So you do need all of the power supplies on at the same time to power all of your graphics cards. So I'm going to bridge my secondary and tertiary power supplies right now, and then I'm going to continue assembling, and we'll come back to installing one card and then getting it fired up just enough to change all the settings you need to change, and then I'll walk over to my other computer and I will walk you through how to set up with Hive. So that's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick test and make sure that works. Yep, perfect. So I'm going to do that for my secondary as well, and then I'll get it all installed. Okay, so I've got my primary, secondary, and tertiary power supplies all mounted. This and this, pardon me, have the little bridge wire. Next thing I'm going to do is install a single GPU, and I'm actually going to put it with no riser, or no I'm not, I'm going to have to use a riser because it won't clear here, but I'm going to install it into either this or this slot, but again, just one, so we can get it fired up and get into what's called the BIOS, which is kind of the fundamental first step of any computer turning on that tells all of the software what it's actually talking to hardware-wise. We're going to have to enable a few things to get 6 graphics cards to work on this board. This is a Ryzen 5 3600X. It does not have the ability to use onboard video here. If you had a, I don't know, I mean, you could have a 3400G maybe, that might work with this BIOS out of the box, but the APUs only have 8 PCIe lanes coming out, and you don't need to know what that means, but essentially anything processor-wise that has built-in graphics is not an ideal solution for using 6 graphics cards on a board like this. They're fine on a mining-specific board, but you really do want all your bases covered, so stick with a CPU that has 16 PCIe lanes, like a 3600X or a 3600, that would be just fine, or even a 3300X, and we should have no issues with this at all. So let me get one card up here, plug it into some of this PCIe. I'll probably run off the primary power supply right now just so I don't need to do anything else, and let's get into the BIOS. Now you're probably asking yourself, what is a riser? What is BIOS? All this other stuff. So this is a riser. I will link this. This is one kit right here. What this allows you to do is run one of these, which is known as a single times slot. So this is a PCIe X1. It allows you to run an X16 device on an X1 slot. So otherwise you would be limited to 2 graphics cards on this motherboard because that's the only place they would fit. But this literally allows you to plug this into the board, use genuinely is a USB 3 cable. It has 7 conductors in it, and that loops up and plugs in to this, which sits underneath and actually connected directly to your graphics card. I would suggest you get rid of this. Your riser will come with this. It is okay to use these if you have 1 or 2 cards and they're low power cards for the PCIe riser, but for a big boy, not a good idea. These can draw up to 70 watts, and this little hard drive connector is not rated for that. So I would recommend, and I will link these down below as well, you get one of these. And by one, I mean order a bunch. I'll link these too. These are a little bit longer. It's kind of nice. So what this will do is it will actually adapt one of your PCI Express power connectors, and each one of your power supply will have 4 of these. It will adapt 1 into 2, and what that will let you do is you can just push the little connector off here, plug it directly into the riser, and then plug the other one in to your graphics card. So you're only splitting a little bit of power that way, and it's a lot less sketchy. So I'll set this up and I will show you what one looks like, and then you should get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have one riser plugged in. It's a little bit stressed out right at that angle. We'll fix that later. I have all the power connectors on the main board. I hooked up the little power switch that comes with the mining frame to the pins that will be listed in your motherboard manual right up here. And since I'm not confident that I have everything on the correct power supply, I'm going to turn on the secondary, the tertiary, the primary, hit the power button, and yep, we've got moving fans, which is great. I still have to cable manage all of this, but let's see if we get a signal. Excellent. So start hammering the delete key. All right, so we're gonna do a few things here. Sorry about the ultra wide. We're gonna go over to OC Tweaker, and we are gonna do XMP Profile 1. The next thing I'm going to do is CPU core voltage. There it is. Yep, so that's perfect. I want 1.1 volts, 3.8 gigahertz. That's just if we want a CPU mine with it too. After that, we want to hit, I believe it's F7, no. Advanced, here we go. Restore after power loss. We want to turn that on. So if you just turn off the power supplies and then turn them back on, your computer will power up, which is really, really good. We'll leave the LAN controller turned on for right now. SATA mode, we want that. Serial port, disable that, we don't need it. Okay. Don't need the TPM. I'm looking for a setting which I might have to find and get back to you. Yep, give me a sec here. Here it is. AMD PBS under advanced. Change this to by 4x4x4x4. Change PCIe to Gen 1. And then after that, hit F10, save configuration, let it come back into the BIOS, and now we will go back over to my laptop and I will show you how to get started with Hive. I'm just gonna make sure that this thing posts. It should. So we wanna see that ASRock logo on the screen. There it is, we're good. So now we can shut off the mining rig again and go over to your other Windows PC. Okay, next step, I am going to show you how to mine to NiceHash with Hive OS. And you don't need to do that. If you'd rather have Ethereum going straight into your Ethereum wallet, you can skip this entire NiceHash step. But if you want to be paid out in Bitcoin, I recommend you do it this way. So go to nicehash.com, register, and then you can get to your, let's see, go through all the registration process. There's going to be a few things. You're going to have to confirm your email. You're going to eventually have to do a know your customer. So you're going to have to deal with, your ID and all that other stuff just for tax reasons. But once you have your account set up, then you can go straight into Hive. But this will give you a wallet address where Hive can actually send the cryptocurrency that you are mining, you are going to be mining Ethereum into NiceHash's pool, and then they will pay you out in their wallet in Bitcoin. So now that you've got that done, let's go over to Hive. So I'm going to go through and register with Hive as well, and I will come back as soon as that's done. Okay, so once you're done setting up Hive, you'll have this screen. Click on whatever you've named your farm, go up to the plus, hit Add Worker, Add Rig, Install New, and then Download. Once you've downloaded, go to your Downloads folder, double-click on the Hive OS installer, and it will run you through a series of things after you allow the firewall to actually get through, and just go through, find the flash drive, and hit download. What it will then do is download the latest release of Hive OS with your parameters already set for your mining rig. It will decompress it, and it will write it in a bootable file to your flash drive. So while I'm waiting for that to write, I did install a solid state drive. I'm going to use that eventually once we boot the flash drive to actually write the OS installation over to it. So I'll show you exactly what that means, but the rig is currently powered off. The SSD is installed with SATA power, and the SATA is hooked up to the controller on the motherboard. So let's go check on Hive and see how close we are to done downloading. Okay, so it's still writing to the drive. We are 51% done. This will take some time. It is about 8 gigs of data. Okay, as soon as that stops flashing, we will shove it in the computer, hit the power button, and by that I mean turn on the power strip that all the power supplies are connected to, and it should boot automatically. All right, plug that into a USB 3.0 port. And it should boot. Yep, okay, awesome. So this time we should get past the BIOS screen. Come on, Hive. Uh-oh. There we go, okay. I just had to do a second boot. I'm not exactly sure. I might have just been updating the BIOS for the correct boot order. So we should see some Linux showing up here in a second. Excellent. We are showing one of the 3070 Ti's, which is all we have connected. And yeah, we're showing no miner set, no flight sheet. That is correct. So now let's come back over to our farm. And there we go. So we see the new rig. First thing we want to do is go rename it. So go over to settings and then type in office, because that's the room where this is currently located. And the next thing we want to do is go to well, technically we want to make a flight sheet. So in order to do that, go all the way back up to the top, click on your farm, then go to flight sheets. Then you're gonna have to go through add a wallet. I'm going to be mining Ethereum. And I'm going to be using NiceHash. So ETH BTC. And I'm gonna go ahead and do this. I don't want you to see my wallet, even though it doesn't matter. And yeah, okay. I'll do that and I'll get back to you in 1 second. All right, so once you've added a wallet, then we can go to flight sheets, add a flight sheet. So when you are adding it, don't do Ethereum, go down to ETH hash for NiceHash, then you can enter the wallet, the NiceHash pool, and you can still select NB Miner. So NB Miner will automatically apply the 74% OC, and when you're setting up this wallet, the way you get to your mining address is just go to mining in NiceHash and then click this and then copy. So anyway, I'm going to update that. Then I'm going to go to workers, find my rig, the flight sheet, and I'm going to resend it to the rig because we should be good here. And now what you can do is, since you have a flight sheet, you can go over to workers, and you could just go right to your flight sheet and hit the rocket ship to set it for the miner. But I would highly recommend you go over to overclocking for a 3070 Ti, and this is specific card to card and model to model. So I know for sure that my cards seem to like 1550, and the memory clock is here. You would enter double what is in Afterburner. So these cards liked to be at 1300. So I'm going to key in 2600, and I'm going to key in 60% fan speed. And I'd like to limit them to 165 watts. So now I hit the overclock, and every 3070 Ti that I add after the fact will have this same overclock. If you know your OCs for your cards, you can just do, card 1 space card 2 space card 3 card space 4, and you can do the same thing for memory clock and fan if you want separate power limits, fan speeds, memory clock, or anything else like that. But if you have all identical cards, I would recommend working that way. So right now, I'm going to go ahead, go back to flight sheets and hit the rocket ship, and we should not only see things change here, we should hear the fan ramp up on that one card, and we should see this change, because it should be talking to the miner, it should be downloading NB Miner, it should be configuring it, it should be applying the overclock to the card, and then it will start mining. I am seeing that this has a Hive OS update that's needed. I will do that as soon as this thing starts mining, but I don't really like adding too many things to the queue, just because it tends to freak the machine out a little bit. So I'm gonna wait for all that to propagate, and then let's come back to it. And ideally, there it is, NB. So I wanna start seeing hash rate. All right, so it sees the rig, that's great. You won't see any details because it is an unmanaged rig, but you do get, I would absolutely suggest going this direction. So there we are. I'm gonna let that run just for a sec, and then I'm gonna shut it down entirely, and then I'm gonna add more GPUs. So here we see our well actually there's only 5 GPUs here right now. I was still waiting on the 6th to show up, but everything recognized just fine. Risers are good, PSU's all kicked on, and they are recognized in Hive OS as well as NiceHash. So you shouldn't really have any issues with that. If they don't come up, make sure that you have above 4G decoding enabled, and PCIe Gen 1 and CSM enabled. So here we are a few days later. Everything's been absolutely perfect. I do have the CPU mining XMR as well. You don't have to do that, but cards are all doing between 54 and 58 megahash, limited to 175 watts of power. If you have 3070 Ti's, here's what you can start with: 1550 or 1600 core and 2600 memory. It's possible that some of these cards are as bad as 1800 mem, and some of them are as good as 3500, 4000, but this is kind of a safe and stable way to put it. So you can see, even with a current BTC value of about 50,000, that we're still pulling in over 20 bucks a day in Bitcoin, and it is currently a Wednesday, and I set it up on a Sunday of the prior week, so we're doing pretty well.